You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your Apples and your AMC and your hood options and look a little bit farther afield at the Bitcoin, at the ETH, and whatever the heck else is lighting up the derivatives side on the crypto space. Going to talk the volume, the volatility, the OI, the SKEW, the unusual activity, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from the aforementioned network, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting theoptionsinsider.com. Speaking of ever-exciting, I can confirm for all of our members of the secret club out there that the next Pro Q&A will be coming up tomorrow at the usual time, 3 p.m. Central. We had to do it on Wednesday last week to accommodate Nick's schedule, but now we're back to our usual time there on Tuesdays at around 3 p.m. Central. And I can confirm that it will be Saad Hussein, the founder and CEO of Vesica Technologies, a.k.a. the creators of that cool tool a lot of you like to use called MyAx Sift Search, will be our guest tomorrow for that Pro Q&A session. A lot of you have questions about how to construct your unusual activity searches and what you should be looking for. That's what they do full time over there. So get those questions in now for tomorrow's session. It starts live tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central. Maybe we'll see if we can throw some crypto curveballs at him as well. That should be fun. And speaking of crypto curveballs, it wouldn't be a fun show if I couldn't throw some curveballs at our next guest. I haven't checked in with him a little bit. Mr. Bill ULIVIERI, a.k.a. the blockchain advisor, a.k.a. the principal over there at CENACLE Capital Management. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program, sir. It has been too long.
Mark, thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure being with you, always.
Well, the last time you were on, Bill, my producer just informed me, was back on May 17th. And at the time, the price of Bitcoin was about $43,000. So not a heck of a lot has happened, sir. Nothing going on out there. About the same level.
Well, if you want to just go from, the 2 points that make a straight line, yeah, you could say that really.
There we go. So the show is over. Nothing to discuss. Nothing has happened, sir.
Go home, call it a day. No, crazy stuff is going on. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Amazing.
A lot of crazy stuff, and we will get into it as we kick off the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action out there in the world's leading digital asset, aka Bitcoin. And joking aside, a lot has happened, even over the last 24 hours out there. In our last show, we were threatening the 40,000 level, not quite breaking through it at about 39,700. Coming into today's show, though, we have broken through it pretty aggressively up to about 46,000. It's like it topped out around 46,200 and change, which is also pretty much the high for the week out here so far. So blowing through new levels. The low of the week, it trended down to about 37,600 and change out there. But getting a lot of lift, a lot of juice out there in the Bitcoin landscape over the past 24 hours. But I was joking at the top of the show, Bill, but it has been a while since we've checked in with you. Net show to show, price level not that different, but a lot has happened in between. So catch us up. What's been lighting up your tape in the world of Bitcoin since we last chatted with you, Bill, back in May?
Well, Mark, as a former options trader, you know that we just love, the bell curves and being long gamma traders. And we're always buying the decline and selling into the rally. And we're keeping an eye, part of our volatility is really like a log normal bell curve, right? Black-Scholes models and all these kind of things. And so I saw back in the high, most altcoins and Bitcoin made a high in the March, April time period. FOMO was really high. We had Bitcoin, north of 60,000. And then they just pulled the plug on it, once again down into the high 29,000s of Bitcoin. And so really all we've done is we've just gone coast to coast in we went from the far right side of the bell curve to the far left side of the bell curve. So we were 50, 60, 80% overbought on our weekly moving averages. We went to about 58% oversold in June and part of July. And now we've rallied back to being basically unchanged. We are smack dab in the middle of the bell curve. You and I would call that fair value. Yet the average year-to-date performance of about 220 tokens I follow is still up 418% year-to-date. So crazy returns in across the entire digital asset world. But in terms of, like you said, from point A to point B, we're kind of in the same place. But technically, very fair valued in my opinion.
Yeah, a lot going on out there today. There's some debate about an amendment for the infrastructure bill that could touch on crypto. So that's contributing to some of today's outperformance to the upside. Pretty much everything is green out there across the screen. Let's break it down out here. Of course, a lot of these analytics coming at you courtesy of our friends over there in Genesis Volatility. You can kick the tires for yourselves. You know where to go. GVOL.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. You can see all these analytics for yourself, the volatility, the SKEW, the OI, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. And like we said, coming into showtime, that vol is shooting up out there in Bitcoin land. On our last show, it was hovering around, low 80s, 81% or so. And we were talking for a while, can Bitcoin vol, can it maintain a bid? It has these kind of sparks of life, and then it kind of trends right back down, which is very analogous to gold vol if you watch that space at all. But today, it's back on the other side. That is trending up north again. Coming into showtime, it was threatening to break into the triple digits level. It was at about a 96%. We'll see if we can get to 100% by the end of the day. The way it's trending, it seems like it could get there as we continue to move out there. BitVol, which is our old friend Simon Hose, that's his kind of Bitcoin VIX. You can find that for yourselves for free as well. That's at t3index.com, or just type T3 and BitVol out there. You'll see that one is sparking to life as well. Last show is at about a 90.5. This show is about a 110. That uses more of a VIX methodology of kind of like a 30-day implied vol level with some SKEW thrown in there as well. If you don't know what any of that means, listeners, if you're confused about the terms we're throwing around on the show here today, check out some of our educational content on the network. Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio will serve you well on that front, get you up to speed so you can dive into all this fun stuff on the crypto front as well with us. And coming into showtime, that SKEW evolving a wee bit out there in the Bitcoin front. Not a ton, but somewhat. Our last show was positive, about 4.8, and coming into today's show, closing in on a 7, about 6.7 to the positive side. So still positive, but looking even more so up there. Speaking of more so, we got more options open out there on Bitcoin land as well. That tends to happen when we see these aggressive upside moves. People start piling in to the call side and also to the puts, and we're seeing pretty much both of that. Coming into today's show, we had the open interest on the call front in Bitcoin threatening 100K at about 95,300. It's up nearly 8,000 contracts from last week, so looking a little bit more robust as we've kind of been hanging out and languishing for the last couple of weeks. And of course, when July came off the board a couple of weeks ago, I took a lot of OI with it, but now we're starting to see some of that come back in. Puts, similar story, at about 50,000 exactly open on the put front. That puts it up about 4,000 contracts from last week. And in terms of where you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective, where you guys are playing right now in Bitcoin options, it's still the quarterlies. Dees is still the big dog with about 43,000 contracts open. It's up about 1,500 contracts from last week. And in terms of number two, we got SEP with about 41,300, about nearly 5,000 from last week. So a nice little pop in September. And then August is kind of climbing the chart slowly but surely. A lot of you want that near-term exposure to Bitcoin. You want that gamma. I get it. This thing's moving around. You want some gamma. And so August is climbing the charts as well. 22,400 contracts open in August, up about 3,400 from last week. Remember when July went away a couple of weeks ago, that took nearly 40,000 contracts with it. So there was a lot of paper in July. I expect August to get up to similar numbers before it goes the way of the dodo. Bill, anything out there raising the hackles on the back of your neck or surprising you at all, either on the vol front or the SKEW front? Or are you noticing anything in particular out there in the land of Bitcoin right now, sir?
The only thing I'm really noticing is there was a lot of fear when we were trading in the low 30,000s of Bitcoin. There is an economic model. And again, you and I have seen our fair share of crazy things happen with Black-Scholes model, modified Black-Scholes model, and all the ones that have come from that, depending on the crisis that happened, in the marketplace. But there's an economic model. I would call it a forecasting model for Bitcoin, and it's called the stock to flow ratio. And I follow this guy on Twitter. It's called Plan B, or at 100 trillion USD. And he has this really interesting model called the Bitcoin stock to flow model. And while everybody kind of thought the economic model broke when Bitcoin was trading around 30,000 a token, now that we're above 42, 43,000, now it seems like, hey, we might be able to reach this $100,000 per token price target by the end of 2021 or mid 2022. So I think everybody's taking a huge sigh of relief. And also one thing that I noticed, Mark, and that is with as much of negative content and language was going into the infrastructure bill about cryptocurrency, the truth is, even at the darkest hour when it seemed as though this thing was going to pass and we were going to have these horrible technology rules that were going to push technology offshore, we see Ethereum, we saw Bitcoin, all the altcoins for the most part rallied. Even when we went through the first round, like when it kind of, I don't want to say passed, but when the bill was introduced again with these horrible restrictions. So it's kind of interesting. Like when we see the market go in the direction that's opposite of what we expect, I take notice of that. So those are the two big things that I've seen. And so really it's more contrarian in opinion, the stock to flow model and the language and the infrastructure bill.
Let's see what we're seeing out here as we continue rolling with the analytics. Let's look at the OI, notional OI, the value of the open interest, and that's climbed a bit since our last show. Bitcoin has also climbed in value a little bit as well, so that helps contribute to it a bit. Last show, we had about $5 billion worth of OI outstanding across all the major venues, and this show it has about $6 billion, so about $1 billion more adding on to the tape. And of course, that's all on Deribit. If you add on the other venues, CME and the others out there, you're talking about $6.75 billion or so. The number two venue out there right now is LedgerX, holding kind of firm at about $250 million open. So LedgerX kind of climbing into a firm number two, CME number three, $234 million. Then we've got Bit.com number four at $200 million, and OKEX coming in at the rear of the $189 million. So all of them kind of within spitting distance of each other, but Deribit obviously still clearly the big dog. Speaking of Deribit, the volume out there, we've been kind of wondering for a while what's it going to take to really juice some volume out there, because it's had some price action of late, but it hasn't really resulted in a lot of commensurate options paper until last week. We saw, actually a couple of weeks ago, we saw the busiest day we've seen in quite some time from a notional volume perspective. It was back on July 26th. That was about 1 billion. Most other days around that was a lot less. So there wasn't a lot of paper going up to really go along with the price action we've been seeing. And certainly not if you go back to the heady days when last time Bill was on back in mid-May. We were seeing regular days with 2 billion worth of notional volume changing hands day after day after day. Haven't seen those levels in a while, but we did see 1 billion recently And this past week was, I guess you could say, decently active, certainly compared to what we've seen of late. No 1 billion days out there, but a lot of days that threatened it, 750 million worth of notional multiple times. So not blowing the doors off, but I think you can call it a steady week out there, which is something interesting. You know, Bill, this has kind of been surprising to me and to a lot of our guests. I got to get your thoughts on this as well, because like I mentioned, we have seen a lot of price action out there in Bitcoin of late, yet for whatever reason, the options volume has kind of languished. You know, has that surprised you, or is that kind of what you expected out there, sir?
Well, again, this goes back to the conversation we've had before, Mark, and that is, what should the skew and option volatility really be in Bitcoin, right? Is it like a corn future where we can just completely discount the downside and we only worry about upside rallies? Is it like gold that at one time had a commodity kind of looking option skew, and now it has kind of like more of an equity skew the last time I looked? Like what does it all mean? And I think it changes. Wheat was different from corn, which was different from soybeans. Like every commodity, even though their subsector was commodity, right, and grain, kind of had their own different option skew and profile. So again, Bitcoin, we usually see these highs in the actual marketplace be put in fall, right, and in the spring, sometimes in the springs, like we did this year, in February, March, almost April. And so probably what's going to happen is we're going to trade slightly lower and rally into the fall this year, right? That's what I think, because as prices rally in Bitcoin, I think we're going to see that at the money, volatility really increase. And also look at this, we have a mid-year election. Typically, the stock market does its worst over a 4-year administration in the second year of a new administration. So we have a 16.5, maybe 15 handle in the VIX. I think that the market is going to get a nice pullback. We've had so much positive traditional stock returns so far year to date for 2021, but we had the potential of a pandemic like locking everything down again. So, back in 1987 in the spring, there was a term going around the trading floor called 87 is going to be the year of volatility. And we used to use our hands, like, and do the YOV. And it kind of was fun. It was a joke, right? Because we had the put graveyard at the put option side of the book. And and only a few people were surprised when volatility got into the 300 area the day after the 87 crash. So I kind of think we have a lot of things looming that I don't want to take volatility for granted, quote unquote, weak volatility for granted, because I think we're going to see a spike both in Bitcoin volatility and across the board in traditional equity indexes.
That will be interesting. One of the interesting things we've seen out there in Bitcoin for a while, I kind of mentioned at the top of the show there, is when we do get these spikes in Bitcoin vol, it seems like it's kind of short-lived. It's kind of acting like precious metals vol, where you get a nice little resurgence for a bit, then it kind of comes off just as quickly and you hover around those kind of lower levels again. That's kind of what Bitcoin's been doing pretty much ever since your last appearance, Bill. So we'll see if this breakout is the time when that changes, or if we trade around 100% for a day or so and then come right back down to the 80-odd% level that we were trading on our last show. That'll be certainly something to keep an eye on out there on the Bitcoin front this week, listeners. Speaking of keeping an eye on things, let's keep an eye on where you folks are lining up. Where are the size positions out there right now in Bitcoin options? Let's find out. Number one right now is the 50,000 strike with about 9,500 contracts open. It's actually down about 500 from last week. So a little bit of close and taking some paper off there on the 50,000 strike as we get ever so close to that strike. It seemed so far away not too long ago. Now, a little bit closer up ahead there. Number two, the 60K strike, 8,500 contracts open there. It's up nearly 2,000 from this time last week. So some new positioning on the very optimistic 60,000 strike. Now, if the 60,000 strike, if that's not optimistic enough for you, don't worry. We got you covered. Number three is the par strike, a.k.a. the 100,000 strike. Yes, we're back to those levels, listeners. 8,100 contracts open there. It's up about 1,500, piling into the 100,000 strike over the past week. Are they selling it? Are they buying it? Either way, that's a pretty optimistic strike to line up on. Number four, the far more rational, actually in the money strike now, the 20,000 strike with about 8,000 contracts open. That's actually unchanged from last week, so not much of a change there. And number five, the pretty much at the money strike right now, the 40,000 strike with about 7,700 contracts open. That's also unchanged. So the bottom half of our top five, not really changing a lot, which is interesting, even though we have seen some action out there on the Bitcoin price front Speaking of action, not a ton going on out there in CME from an options perspective on Bitcoin. The busiest days we've seen have been pretty much the end of July. July 26th, we saw a whopping 174 contracts. That doesn't sound like a lot, but again, it's a 5X coin. And given most days, we'll see like 20 odd contracts. 174 is actually a lot out there. July 30th, you saw 138 on the tape. Nothing really coming close to that this week. Futures, same deal. Kind of a quiet day on the CME futures for about 8,000 contracts on the tape. Coming into showtime, again, the busiest day we've seen out there of late is the 26th of July with about 23,000 contracts. That was kind of normal. We were seeing that volume for a while there. And of course, as I mentioned, Bitcoin options and futures volume has kind of been light over the last couple of months. So we haven't seen a lot of days up in that 20+ thousand level again. The OI has also come off a bit on the Bitcoin futures, down to about 6,500. That's down about 800 or so from last show. And micro Bitcoin futures, maybe some of the contracts you folks are more interested in because they are a bit more bite-sized, or really a lot more bite-sized. 16,000 of those on the tape today. And July 26th was also the busiest day for that one. They did nearly 50,000 contracts, 48,000 contracts. And the OI out there right now is about 15,500. So there actually is some paper floating around. Again, a much smaller contract, but there is some paper floating around. If you are intrigued, if you've kind of been maybe tempted to the dark side by the micro Bitcoin futures, and that could potentially be your course of action. I know, Bill, as an advisor out there, you're kind of limited in the vehicles you could use to trade these, which is why I know a lot of advisors have been paying keen interest to the CME products because it's from a licensed to regulated exchange that people have actually heard of. And these are products that you could actually use. Have you been more intrigued by this product since the last time we chatted? Or are you still kind of playing wait and see, Bill?
Respectfully, Mark, I don't look that much at the CME products. For me, my focus has been in the last 3 months intensely on the Grayscale products and Coinbase tokens. So Coinbase has around 40 plus tokens listed on the Coinbase platform. You know, I love what they're doing. I follow them voraciously, and because I am a Series 65 investment advisor, my products that I'm allowed to invest for clients are securities, right? It's not a commodity. I'm not a CFTC or a CFA, right? I'm a financial advisor. So anything that's traded on an exchange, I'm really interested in. Although I am permitted to do some off exchange or over the counter things, I don't, right? Because I like the clean transparency of exchange products. So having said that, I'm trying to pivot my business to be able to monetize everything that I see at Coinbase, which is why I've created this weekly newsletter. But really, my goal is to trade Bitcoin with gold, Bitcoin with Ethereum, Ethereum with the GDLC, which is the Grayscale large cap digital, like it's a DeFi index. So, I'm trying to skate to where I believe the puck is going to be. And I think the puck is going to be with retail investors who my niche is on Coinbase products and Grayscale products. So I keep track of the discount to net asset value, the premium to net asset value, any product that Grayscale comes out with, any token that Coinbase lists that I can get pricing for, I want to be all over it because that's where I really think retail wants to be. I don't have any institutional clients per se. So, listen, I can't speak for you, but I started at the options exchange in 1982, at the Board of Trade in 1980, right? And I spent my whole life in the exchange arena. And now I find more interesting things, respectfully, on the retail side, like Coinbase and Grayscale.
That is interesting. I'm looking here right now because the Grayscale product has been very contentious of late. You mentioned the premium and the discounts out there, also how well it actually tracks. Coming into today, we're seeing Bitcoin spot up about 6.7 or so % right now, and looks like the Bitcoin Trust is up about 7.5%. So a little bit of outperformance out there. And how are we looking on the premium/discount front right now, Bill? I know that's a hotly contentious topic. Where are we lining up on that front right now, sir?
Well, as we speak, and this is updated every 60 seconds, maybe every few minutes. The Grayscale investment trust is trading at a 10.96% discount. So GBTC is trading at roughly an 11-point discount to cash. So while I am still bullish on Bitcoin, I think coming from a world of arbitrage, I don't see why there are not people buying GBTC at an 11% discount and selling, in a kind of cash Bitcoin they may have, or an arbitrage like that. Because we saw the same thing happen before, where people were buying Bitcoin and then they were locking it up and putting it into the Grayscale products and hopefully collecting a 30% premium, because that's about how high the premium was at one time. So I find those kind of arbitrage opportunities really interesting. And even if, my clients, retail clients, are nowhere near as well capitalized to actually put a trade like that on, I find it something very, very interesting to watch, just like you and I would watch the premium level in the S&P 500 futures versus cash, or the OEX to S&P, or all those other kind of arbitrage trading opportunities that you and I were very, very familiar with.
Yeah, 11%. That seems pretty hefty. You're right. I'm surprised more people aren't trying to do that type of trade, only with the premium out there. I'm curious. You track these more aggressively than I do, Bill. What's the deepest that discount has gotten over the past, let's say, 6 months or so?
I would say the deepest discount I've seen was in the low 20% area. And I could pull up my graph and see exactly when that was. But, it's also interesting. We have Catherine Woods, who is the co-founder or the founder of the ARK suite of mutual funds, the ARK Innovation Funds. They just bought, they bought a million shares of GBTC recently on the decline into the, 29 to 30,000 handle. So, here you've got these money managers who see that, the statement was, the press release was, we didn't buy Bitcoin futures. We didn't buy Bitcoin cash and lock it up in a cold wallet. We bought GBTC. And I think that's because it was at 11% or 12% discount at the time that they bought it. And so, again, I think we saw the premium in Grayscale products go negative before the 63,000 handle mark, sold off into the high 20s. So I think that there's something here. I think it's an indicator. I can't prove it yet, but something tells me there's something here, and I want to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I know for a long time people were wringing their hands over the premium, like you mentioned, how steep the premium got to the Bitcoin. Now there's at a discount. That does make it, I think, a little bit more intriguing. It makes you want to scratch your chin and say, what is driving that discount? And is that something you can take advantage of as an active retail trader? Something interesting to ponder as we head on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, let's do it. Altcoin universe. I think Bill said at the top of the show he tracked something like 400 odd coins and tokens. We're not going to go that far. We're just going to do a top 10 here for now. And again, take these market caps with an overall grain of salt. Number 10 here, we got Uniswap holding firm at about 16.7 billion in the number 10 spot. Number 9, Polkadot with about 20.5 billion. Number 8, USD Coin, 27.7 billion. Number 7, it's Doge at about 33.75 billion. Number 6, XRP hanging out there at about 38 billion, almost exactly. Number 5, we got Cardano, 47.8 billion. Number 4, Binance Coin, 59.5 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 62.5 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, 368 billion. And Bitcoin, the big dog, starting to look a little bit bigger again out there. Not quite at that 1T level again, but looking a lot closer to it than it has been of late. 862 billion worth of market cap. Let's kick things off out there. And the clear number 2 that I know a lot of you keep an eye on. In fact, for a lot of you, ETH is kind of really the number 1. That's really the one you pay most attention to. Certainly from a trading, from a vol, and the whole ETH ecosystem beyond it. I know a lot of you kind of hang your hat out there in ETH. On our last show, we had about a 26.5, and coming into today's show, north of the 3,000 level, 31.62 when we kicked off the show. So that's a nice little pop out there from our last show out there. You're talking well over 400 handles out there from our last show. In terms of vol, we have last show, we were starting to get frothy. We were threatening that triple digit level, 99%, but that's shooting up in the last 24 hours, as you can imagine, just like Bitcoin vol was as well, up to about 115%. The 30-20 skew on our last show is at about a 7. This show up a little bit, up to about an 8.3. And overall, volume-wise, we're seeing a decently active week out there, all things considered. Probably the most active in terms of notional volume on Deribit that we've seen in quite some time. Multiple days over 400 million worth of notional this week, which again isn't the 1 billion levels we were seeing back in April or May, but compared to the anemic 100 plus million days we've been seeing for quite some time, it's actually quite a bit. On the 5th, we saw 433 million worth of notional. On the 6th, we saw 424 million. We'll have to see what today. So far, coming into showtime, we were a little bit north of 200 million. So we'll see if we can have another 400 plus million worth of notional day out there. Again, you got to go all the way back to May 19th. That's the last time I think we saw 1 billion worth of notional out there in ETH. Mr. Bill, I know you watch a lot of altcoin, but anything catching your eye in terms of ETH out there?
Ether, it's has first adoption activity and popularity like Bitcoin does, right? But I will say that what I find interesting is Ether's cousin, I guess you could say, ETH Classic, Ethereum Classic, I find really, really interesting. There's still some unknown events going on with the Ethereum going from a proof of work consensus to a proof of stake type of governance. And so the question is, what will happen to Ethereum once it goes proof of stake and all these miners are no longer being able to mine Ethereum? And I think you're going to see them go to Ethereum Classic. And actually, Ethereum Classic has some very good developers and definitely a very loyal team to the development. And so ETH is interesting, right? It'll always be one of my first loves because it was able to acquire and get the notice of Bill Gates and Microsoft Visual Studio and basically cryptocurrency or blockchain as a service. And we're going to be seeing all the NFTs, the non-fungible tokens using Ethereum, convert into Ethereum in order to buy an NFT. So Ethereum is still number two for me, but I think Ethereum Classic is going to be one of those little known things like the family member that very rarely shows up for Thanksgiving dinner and then shows up a couple of years later and like, wow, that's really a cool uncle. Like, how come he never shows up so much? So, love Ethereum Classic, and some of the OG tokens that we were first introduced to.
Yeah, I like that. The crypto first loves. I'm with you on the ETH Classic. Back when all the big sell-off happened, I picked up some ETH, and also I took a look at some ETH Classic books. I know that's a bit of a contentious one. Some folks say it had that vulnerability, which kind of caused the original split from ETH Classic into the current modern incarnation of ETH. But you're right, there is something interesting afoot out there in ETH Classic. That's one I've kind of been watching for a while as well. I guess you can call that one of my crypto first loves, I suppose, as well. Let's see what's going on out there from an overall action perspective, how much you folks are actually loving the ETH options this week. And we're seeing some growth, as you might expect, particularly to the upside in ETH option OI. Coming into today's show, 781,000 contracts open on the call side in ETH. That's up nearly 100,000 from this time last week. So you folks are loving yourselves some upside in ETH. Puts 420,000 open there. It's up about 17,000 from last week. All of this upside means a little bit more notional OI out there in ETH options land. Last week, there was about 3 billion worth of notional OI open. This week, about 4 billion on Deribit. So continuing to go in the right direction for all the ETH bulls out there. In terms of where you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective, again, ETH has always kind of been quarterly dominated, and that still is the case right now. 394,000 contracts for number one. That's decent. That's up about 32,000 contracts from this time last week. September holding firm at number two with about 288,000 contracts open. That's up about 22,000 from last week. And coming up number three, though, is AUGS. Maybe that can break into the quarterly domination there. 171,000 contracts on the tape. That's up nearly 40,000 from this time last week. And again, if we're seeing a lot of sharp, aggressive moves in ETH, and I do expect some near-dated contracts to come onto the scene pretty aggressively. When July went off the board a couple of weeks ago, it had nearly 300,000 contracts open. So it would be number two on this list right now if it was still around. In terms of where you folks are lining up from a position perspective, where are the size options positions in ETH right now? Let's find out. Number one, it is the 5,000 strikes. That's kind of been the number one strike out there for a while. It sounds very optimistic. It certainly sounded a lot more so a couple of weeks ago, now that we're north of 3,000 again. It isn't as far away, but a lot of people are piling into that strike this week. 78,500 contracts are open on that strike now. That's up 15, nearly 16,000 contracts in this time last week. So a lot of opening paper on the 5,000 strike. We had a guest recently talking about the listing of the 50,000 strike in ETH. Not quite there yet. That would be interesting if we did get there, but not quite there yet. Right now, you have to settle for the 5,000 strike. Number two, it's still that kind of legacy position that's just hanging out there, the 480 strike. There's 46,000 contracts still open. They've been open forever. Who knows when they're going to go away? But that's effectively like having the future now or the spot. So nothing much of a change there. Number 3, the 10,000 strike. So if 5,000 strike wasn't optimistic enough for you, the 10,000 strikes got you covered with 45,000 contracts. That's a new addition to our top 5 here in East. So let's keep an eye on that one. Number 4, it's the 3,000 strike. Again, kind of the at the money strike right now. 43,200 contracts open there. It's up nearly 3,000 from last week, about 2,800. And number 5, it's the 4,000 strike. And I've been saying for a while, where are these more relevant strikes in ETH? We have all these weird ones dominating the top 5. Now we're finally starting to see some actually relevant strikes popping in here again. The 4,000 strike with about 41, almost 42,000 contracts open again. That's a newcomer to the top 5 as well. So we'll keep an eye on all these, how they ebb and flow. But we actually have the 3,000, the 4,000, and the 5,000 strike now, as opposed to some of these weird 400s and all the other nonsense we used to have floating around out there. In terms of floating around, that's kind of what the ETH futures are doing over there at CME right now. About 4,000 contracts on the tape today. And the OI is also about 4,000. It's up about 400 or so contracts. So it looks like ETH futures getting a little bit of a lift, even though the busiest day we've seen out there has been on the 28th of July with about 7,000 contracts. And Bill, before I keep rolling into some questions and some other altcoin, you mentioned you watch some 400 odd tokens and currencies out there. What else is on your radar? You always have some interesting new altcoin on your radar. What else are you keeping an eye on out there these days, sir?
Oh boy. Well, I am keeping an eye on a token called Zilliqa. The symbol is ZIL. It's trading for about 9 cents a token. It has a market cap of roughly $1 billion. And the reason why I like Zilliqa lately is because you might remember, speaking of the Chicago Mercantile, there is a woman named Rumi Morales that worked with the CME Group on their technology.
Yeah,
side.
she's a podcaster now. She's diving into my neck of the woods.
I facilitated an interview with her a couple of years back at the Voice of Blockchain event, and I had the highest respect for Rumi. She's very hardworking, super smart. And if I'm not mistaken, I just saw a headline go by across my newsfeed recently that she is now on the board of directors for Zilliqa, because I think that her Outlier Ventures, and this is rumor, okay, this is not fact. This is just what I've been able to piece together, because this is what we do, right, as traders. Is her position at Outlier Ventures probably, in my opinion, in my rumored opinion, put her on the board to keep track of this investment that they may have there. Now, again, everybody has to do their own research, right? DYOR. But Zilliqa is a really interesting project, as well as still my favorite fan token called Chiliz. That symbol is CHG. Market cap of roughly 1.85 billion, is trading at 31 cents a token. Again, some of these you're going to have to hunt down. They're not all available in the United States or on Coinbase, but again, that's just for the lack of a better term, the poop coins, the altcoins that are a complete tear-up. Like, you just take a shot. But other ones like Melon, which is now been rebranded the Enzyme Finance, really, really interesting. The DeFi tokens like Sushi Swap and Uniswap, and those seem very, very interesting. So there's too many tokens for me to really pick one, right? It's like being a father to like 12 kids. Like, who's your favorite? Well, I love them all. So each one of these has their own token and certain project personality that I just love. And I'm not quite sure which one of these is going to be my favorite child, but they all have something really interesting to them.
You love these utility tokens. You always have that. Zilliqa is another utility. I know you had the gaming token you were big on a while ago. These are what you like, Bill, the utility. You like to have some use to them at the end of the day.
Well, of course, because ultimately at the end of the day, what monetizes a token is how well the network is adopted and how well it's used. Whether it's 294 or 94 Kennedy Expressway, like we get a little piece of the action for that. And also one of my other favorite ones that I do not have a position in, but would like to, and that is Helium. Helium token is basically the people's network. You buy equipment about the size of your wireless router in your house, and you can install a wireless router and become part of this global mesh network that's going to bring in 5G around the globe. They had a few thousand hotspots, I guess you could say, several years ago. Now there's 50 or 60,000 hotspots around the globe. These are the things that mousetraps and scooters and these bicycles that you can rent downtown in Chicago, car washes, all the machinery talks to each other on the Helium network. So there's a lot of cool tokens out there, a lot of cool projects, and how this is all going to work its way out. No one knows, but there are interesting things, Mark, going on out there.
They are fascinating. I'm just looking at some of these ones you mentioned. Zilliqa claims to be the world's first public blockchain to rely entirely on a sharded network. Looks like it's trading for around, looks like about 8 to 9 cents or so right now. I had a nice pop recently back earlier this year when everything else under the crypto sun, including Doge, was rallying into May, got up to about 20, almost 22 cents. So then it sold off recently down to, looks like about 5.7 cents or so before bouncing back up to where it is right now, right around 9 cents. So nice week or two out here for Zilliqa. Interesting stuff. That's why I like having you on the show, Bill. You always bring some fun altcoins. Speaking of fun altcoins, hit on a few others before we roll on into your questions. Good old XRP having a nice little pop here this week as well, even though I know most of you can't really trade it here in the U.S., so it's kind of mostly a moot point, but still up about 7 cents or so. So a nice little pop for good old XRP. It was about 75 cents last week, about 82 cents this week. Bitcoin Cash up about $46 from last week, and Bitcoin SV up a little over $9 from this time last week. And good old Doge, Bill's favorite / least favorite of all of them out there, up about 6 cents. I won't get you started on Doge, Bill. Instead, we'll keep on rolling, see what you folks have on the brain. It is time to answer your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Questions. You know we love you all, but the folks who have the secret handshake club, those folks get bumped to the top of the list. If you're listening live, just like Nichols is right now, he has a question for you, Bill. He must have listened to some of your old appearances because he says, I believe Bill is a covered call trader. What does he think of Bitcoin or ETH as covered call candidates? And you're right, Bill, that used to be, maybe still is your go-to over there at CENACLE. I know you were very active in equity-oriented covered calls, but taking that and now applying it out to the crypto realm, what do you have to say here for our listener, Nichols? What do you think of Bitcoin or ETH as candidates for covered calls, sir?
I think it would be remarkably profitable. I think it would be ridiculously profitable. And so one of the conversations I'm currently having with my clients is these are people who I manage their IRA and 401k assets for. Little by little, we're adding 2, 3, 4, 5% of cryptocurrency by way of the Grayscale Bitcoin Investment Trust, which wants to be the very first exchange-traded fund on Bitcoin. And then once they get that, then they have the Ethereum and the Ethereum Classic and the basic attention token and dozens of other trusts that could potentially move to the ETF world. To be able to do covered call writing or cash-secured put writing on a Bitcoin or Ethereum exchange-traded fund, oh my gosh, I would have died and gone to heaven. I can't. It's so exciting. I said that the ETF was going to come 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm way off my mark in terms of the regulatory approval for a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency ETF per se. But boy, you know what? I'm going to be all over that. I'm going to be all over that trade. There's going to be so much money, in my opinion, to be made there. With the volatility levels, and the option premiums are going to be insane.
That would be cool. So it sounds like you're more intrigued by doing it, like you said, on the Grayscale trust, as opposed to, let's say, going into spots, ETH, or the futures, and then writing a call against those there, Bill.
Again, I've got to, I have a business that has to operate relatively efficiently, and it has to run compliantly. And Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, it's available on the platform where the broker dealers that custody my client assets. And so it's easy, it's clean, there's good volume. I like the team. They were, first adopters. That's kind of where my heart is. And, maybe my loyalty is in the wrong direction, but I love these guys. I love what they're doing. And they broke they say that the first one through the door is the guy that gets shot. Coinbase, Grayscale, these people were first. They took a lot of heat to get us where we're at today. And I just respect what they do. And I'm going to stay with them because it's just a clean, easy platform from my perspective as we speak today.
Dance with the one that brung you, says Bill out there. Next up, we got a question from Henry. This will be contentious, Bill. Henry wants to know, what do you guys think of Talib's analysis of Bitcoin? Doesn't sound like he's too bullish on it. He sent a link over to a new paper from Nassim Talib, he of Black Swan fame / infamy. Just came out recently. Looks like it came out about a month ago in July. It's titled Bitcoin Currencies and Fragility. If you want to check it out for yourselves, listen, I'll just link. They have the abstract here. I'll just give you a bit of a taste of what the abstract has to say. You'll see what he's talking about pretty quickly. And it says, Bitcoin in its current version, in spite of the hype, Bitcoin failed to satisfy the notion of, quote, currency without government. In parentheses, it proved to not even be a currency at all. He says, and can be neither a short nor long-term store of value. Again, parentheses, its expected value is no higher than zero. He says it cannot operate as a reliable inflation hedge, and worst of all, does not constitute, not even remotely. So he's really accentuating it. Not even remotely a safe haven for one's investments, a shield against government tyranny, or a tail protection vehicle for catastrophic episodes. I know that last will really interest him because that's kind of what the Black Swan is all about, right? Tail hedging. He says, furthermore, Bitcoin promoters appear to conflate the success of a payment mechanism as a decentralized mode of exchange, which so far has failed, with the speculative variations in the price of a zero-sum, maximally fragile asset with massive negative externalities. That can go on, but I think you get a sense of he's not a big fan, Mr. Bill. And, some of the things he points out, we pointed out on the show, there really is no expected value for Bitcoin. It's what the next person can pay, will pay for it. And right now, that next person is willing to pay about $46,000 for it. But outside of that, there really is no expected value. So I'm curious for you, Mr. Bill, if you've had a chance to see this, or at very least breeze through the abstract, and what are your thoughts on, I know your best friend, Mr. Talib's thoughts on Bitcoin, sir?
I think he's 100% wrong. I think that, listen, I remember back in 1985 or 86, Joe Granville predicted the end of the stock market. I think we had traded like at the, 1,200 in the Dow, something crazy like that. And he put out a sell signal. The market went down for a couple of days. And Joe Granville never really recaptured his fame or his popularity, and his returns were horrible. Anybody who's looked at an ETF that was a Black Swan ETF has done horribly bad, right? The VIX indicators had like how many 10-for-1 reverse splits in the last few years. It's designed to go to zero. And this is really the move between modern monetary theory and the Austrian economics, which says value is only what two people say it is. I can make the very best mud pie that was ever created, but it's still mud, and no one's going to pay me for it. And so I've been watching Talib and his conversations with economists and people that I really respect on Twitter, and I think he's way too aggressive, in my opinion. I think he's wrong, and the fact that El Salvador has legislated Bitcoin to be legal tender, and we're seeing more and more companies like JP Morgan, PayPal, MicroStrategies. I mean, I could just go on and on and on about where Bitcoin is coming on. And the truth is, Bitcoin is higher than it was when, that China began getting rid of miners, and even with this legislation coming in from the infrastructure. Talk about something that's very strong in terms of its asset class. We have a deflationary component. We know exactly what it's worth. I think he's 110% wrong on this. But I have to be honest with you, I've never read one of his books. I got just a few pages into his books back when they came out, when he was really hot after the crashes. And I just kind of yawned. I know he has a lot of respect in the community, but not for me.
Yeah, one thing he can do is he can brand, and that Black Swan branding has certainly served him well over the years. I think you probably take some of his points that have some salience to them, like the notion of Bitcoin being this reserve currency. I think his point that it flummoxes around so much, dropping 30% in a day, it would be kind of hard to see Bitcoin serving as that at these current volatility levels. If that volatility were to come off, a ton, then maybe it's a different story. Right now, can you imagine the dollar flipping around 30+% a day? That would be certainly, shall we say, interesting for our economy. So I think some of his points are interesting, but you're right. He also is very strident. Probably got another book coming out on this. He's probably got some other cool term, whatever the Black Swan term he's going to have for Bitcoin is going to be, and he's going to be marketing it there. He's certainly not pulling his punches, that's for sure. What do you think about this, listeners? The notion, Bitcoin obviously doesn't really have expected value. It's hard for it to be a reserve currency. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you a fan of Talib? Are you more on the anti-camp here with Bill? What do you have to say here? I'm curious for you folks out there who are listening. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. Unfortunately, that music means we have to leave it there. Mr. Bill probably have a whole show just discussing black swans and everything out there in Talib land. It certainly is a hot topic. But before we go, Mr. Bill, you mentioned you're kind of following a whole bunch of tokens and assets out there, and you're even putting them together in a fun little newsletter. Why don't you tell our folks a little bit about that and where they can get access to it if they are so inclined?
Oh, Mark, I really appreciate that. Again, as I said before earlier in the show, that I am really hyper-focused on the tokens that are being listed on Coinbase. Because right now, again, from the investment advisor side, there's still a little bit of limit in terms of what I can execute through our broker-dealer. So if anybody's listening and is interested in following, getting a weekly newsletter, it's text the word blockchain, text the blockchain to 22828, and you can sign up through a form, using your phone. Otherwise, they can give me they can send me an email at info@CENACLEcapital.com. Get them on the Blockchain Advisor newsletter. And again, we discuss Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I'll pick one or two other alt tokens available on Coinbase or the funds on Grayscale.
Look at you, text-based sign up. How millennial of you, sir? Look at you, the millennial you. Are you going to Venmo me some money next? What's next, sir?
No, Venmo. No, thank you. I'll send you Dogecoin.
Oh, there we go. That'd be even better. So check it out for yourselves, listeners. Hit them again. Where do you have to text to learn more?
Text the word blockchain to 22828. That's 22828.
There we go. Blockchain to 22828. All you millennial hipsters out there to get Bill's news. Sounds interesting stuff. If you like all these utility tokens, Bill's always got a bunch of them up his sleeve. Check it out for all that and a whole bunch more. You know where to go for all the analytics we used on the show today. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires if you're even remotely interested in this space and you're listening to a show like this. So I have to assume that you are. Then Genesis Volatility is really one of the only games in town when it comes to this type of analytics. So check them out. gvol.io is the place to go. You don't have to go anywhere. Our listeners out there, in terms of what you're expecting for the rest of this week, we're coming at you hot and heavy. For all of you in the Secret Handshake Club, aka the Pro members, we're coming back at you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central, for another live Pro Q&A. It should be a fun one. So if you have questions about how all this unusual options activity really works, how you can kind of do it for yourself, what role it should play in your portfolio, then Saad is going to be a great guest to help answer all those questions and a whole bunch more. Back again on Wednesday, Education Wednesday with Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Then, of course, on Thursday, double dose of TWIFO and episode 2 of the Option Block. Friday, another double dose for our Pro members, Volatility Views. And then after that, exclusive for the Secret Club members out there. You got Options Oddities all the way through to next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.